Horror filmmakers will often try to rely on what is referred to in the industry as practical effects, and have tended to shy away from using computer-generated imagery, or CGI for short. Horror filmmakers are often averse to CGI because the fake blood and fake creatures can sometimes look really bad and take audiences out of the story. So today, we're looking at popular horror movies without CGI. What do they really look like? You do not want to miss this. First, we'll take a look at Warner Bros.' The Conjuring 2. You may be familiar with the Blumhouse production team and their CEO, film producer Jason Blum. They've brought us such films as Insidious, The Last Key, Amityville: The Awakening, and films like Happy Death Day, Paranormal Activity, and The Purge. But for The Conjuring 2, Australian director James Wan and screenwriter Leigh Whannell had decided to use practical effects and ditch the CGI. And frankly, it was a good call. In fact, Wan did such a great job with practical effects that many who saw The Conjuring 2 believed that what they were seeing was CGI. The Conjuring 2 focuses on the story of Lorraine Warren, played by actor Vera Farmiga, and her husband Ed Warren, played by actor Patrick Wilson. The couple plays a pair of quirky ghost hunters dealing with the so-called Enfield poltergeist, an entity that terrorized an English family back in 1977. Amazingly, the film uses little to no CGI whatsoever. According to Wan, he and the VFX team only used CGI to remove certain objects from the frame that weren't period appropriate to the 1970s. Incredibly, the Crooked Man, a thin, ghoulish character who wore a top hat, is actually a professional contortionist named Javier Botet, and not a CGI creation. Next up, we'll look at a film that would have looked incredibly bad were it not for the implementation of CGI. In 2016, a horror/thriller film about a shark made a big splash. It's called The Shallows, and it helped freshen up the killer shark genre made famous back in the 70s by the man himself, Steven Spielberg. The Shallows, which was directed by Juan Collet Serra, was extremely well received by audiences, and part of the reason for the film's positive reception was because the shark looked really cool. In the film, veteran actor Blake Lively plays the character Nancy Adams, a surfer who decides to take advantage of a beautiful morning and head out to catch some waves. But unfortunately, Nancy is stalked and attacked by a great white shark and forced to take refuge on top of a large reef. The shark in the film was accomplished by using CGI and some live-action techniques involving a stunt actor. In an interview shortly after the film was released, Lively said they had a guy with a great white-sized fin and he would swim around on a sea-doo. As you can see, were it not for CGI, the film would have been terribly bad. CGI allowed the Swedish VFX team, Important-Looking Pirates, to create an authentically scary shark. CGI was also employed to add a distinctive shine and color to the shark's skin, which ended up working quite well. When creating the shark, the VFX team spent countless hours studying real-life footage of great whites in action, which helped them to create the most aesthetically pleasing and authentic-looking shark as possible. Up next, we'll look at a big-budget, mind-blowing horror film that would have looked bad were it not for CGI. Back in 2013, $190 million were spent to make the film World War Z. The film would end up grossing over $540 million worldwide. Directed by Mark Foster and starring famed actor Brad Pitt, the film serves as a masterclass in balancing CGI with practical effects. The film's VFX supervisor, Scott Farrar, said that he and Forster wanted to make a never-before-seen zombie film. Instead of zombies that slowly stumbled around, moaning and groaning, they decided to use a real virus, similar to rabies, that would infect the world's population and turn them into fast-moving, bloodthirsty, and violent creatures. There's a scene in the film where 8,500 zombies breach a barricade and gain entry to Israel by essentially dogpiling on top of one another. What many may not realize is that those 8,500 zombies were entirely made using CGI. CGI was also used by the VFX team to create many of the backdrops that were seen in the film, so without CGI, the film wouldn't look nearly as good as it does. CGI obviously played a very key role in World War Z's success. It appears as though how much CGI is required will depend first and foremost on the story itself, and then second, the budget of the film in question. Next up, we'll look at a film from 2009 that was able to create feelings of suspense and horror without the use of CGI. The 2009 film The House of the Devil is set in 1983 and follows the story of a babysitter named Samantha, played by actor Joss Jocelyn Donahue. Samantha plays a cash-strapped college student who takes a babysitting job during a full lunar eclipse. She comes to learn that the homeowners are hiding a terrifying secret. Director Ty West was able to create feelings of horror throughout the first hour of the film, without using any CGI at all. West's techniques were an attempt to pay homage to the supernatural horror films of the 1980s, some of which required no VFX. The way the film itself is shot creates tremendous tension and fear value without VFX, and it still looks great. When the film enters its climax, there is a boatload of gore, and it was all done with the need for CGI. The House of the Devil is a clear example, or masterclass if you like, in CGI-free horror filmmaking that can still pull off high-quality scares without the need for CGI. This gives the film a certain 80s authenticity that could have been completely ruined if CGI had been used. Up next, we'll discuss a popular sci-fi horror film that used CGI, but maybe not correctly. In 2017, the film titled simply Life hit theaters. Directed by Daniel Espinosa and starring famed actor Jake Gyllenhaal, Ryan Reynolds, and Rebecca Ferguson, Life tells the story of a team of scientists aboard the International Space Station that discovers a rapidly evolving life form that caused an extinction-level event on Mars and now threatens all life on Earth. The creature, a strange-looking life form known as Calvin, escapes its containment cell and wreaks havoc aboard the space station. And while the premise sounds exciting and makes you want to break out the popcorn, and despite its A-list cast, the film was a dud in terms of box office success. Some critics have pointed out that the blame for the film's failure rests with director Daniel Espinosa, but we think those critics may be forgetting a very crucial aspect of the Hollywood filmmaking process: studio input and, frankly, downright interference. One critic found the Pokemon-like evolution of Calvin's stages of growth to be funny rather than scary. But to be fair, it's wrong to lay the blame squarely on Espinosa. Hugh Evans, the VFX supervisor who worked on the film, said that Espinosa wanted Calvin to be ethereal and amorphous, so that's what Hugh set out to do. However, then something happened that happens in Hollywood nearly every single day. The studio executives interfered and insisted that Calvin needed to be scarier, and so they insisted that Calvin evolve into something more solid and animal-based. Up next, we'll look at one of the hottest horror films of the 80s that was remade in 2011. When it comes to the horror film genre, director John Carpenter needs no introduction. Similar to Alfred Hitchcock or David Cronenberg, Carpenter is considered to be a master of the genre. So when The Thing was released in 1982, people were completely blown away. Today, The Thing enjoys a rating of 8.1 out of 10 on the Internet Movie Database, IMDb.com, from nearly 400,000 votes. Not bad for some horror film shot back in 1982. To put things into perspective of just how good the film is, James Cameron's Titanic from 1997 has an IMDb rating of 7.8 out of 10 from over 1 million votes. So now, let's try and figure out how the filmmakers behind the 2011 remake of The Thing dropped the ball so badly. The director of The Thing, 2011, Matthijs van Heijingen Jr., and his team were initially going to rely on the use of basic or practical effects, but in the end opted for a CGI creature. That decision would prove fatal to the film's success. The reason for Heijingen's switch to CGI is that he felt that he couldn't pull off the animatronic creature and gore effects as well as Carpenter's team did back in 1982, which is really quite remarkable when you consider that 30 years later, animatronic technology had advanced far ahead of what it was in 1982. The CGI in the 2011 remake is okay, but many fans, us included, feel that an animatronic character combined with good old-school practical gore effects could have made for a much better film, which would have been truer to the original. The Thing 2011 has an IMDb rating of 6.2 out of 10, a far cry from the original film's rating. One would think that shooting a remake of The Thing 30 years later would have made it easier for Heijingen and his team to use practical gore effects and animatronics for the creature scenes, so his decision to opt for CGI still confuses many. Thank you for listening and watching. Please click like and subscribe to our channel. More exciting and informative videos are on the way.